All right, and welcome to Happy Hour with me. I am Eileen Cook. This is the Creative Academy, and it is September 4th. So we have a couple things to potentially get through today. We kind of are sneaking something in. So Bonnie with an I, not Bonnie with the I-E, has been working on some materials that would go to schools, in particular because she is writing middle grade. But this is actually depending, even if you're writing an adult book, these are kind of an interesting thing to take a look at because more and more writers are coming up with bonus materials. So for adult books, so for example, for Tony, it would definitely be worthwhile to have like potentially book club questions.
Right.
That people can come in and sort of download and, start a discussion. People like those kinds of things. But certainly, again, if you're writing YA or middle grade, it's useful to have materials that could be used in a school. Because if there's anything a teacher likes, it is the opportunity to have something that they can jump in with a lesson plan. So it makes their life easy. It can also be material for you if you are potentially doing school visits, which again, for people who write YA and middle grade, school visits are a fairly significant stream of income for a lot of middle grade or younger and YA authors. I do about, it depends, typically I would say 10 to 20 school visits per year. I know some people that are doing several per week, and in fact is sometimes more than what they are making in terms of royalties. So we will get into school visits as a whole separate subject at some point, but today we're going to jump in and talk a little bit about some materials that Bonnie came up with. So what I'm going to do is share my screen and start with the blank versions that Bonnie sent me so you guys can see them and she can get thoughts from you as well. So one second. So hopefully you can now see my screen. It seems to think that you can.
Yep.
So Bonnie has a cover sheet where she says this lesson plan can be used for both middle grade and high school groups. And then she lists the contents. So there's going to be a bio, a lesson guide with a glossary, and then a worksheet that will be shared with students. Now, one of Bonnie's questions is thinking about age appropriateness in terms of language. And where that comes about is this is middle grade, which I would say is probably upper middle grade. I would agree with Bonnie. So you're not having to go as down as much as if they were sort of 8 to 10. But again, you're probably going to want to do that. Now, Bonnie, I will find for you if Crystal hasn't. There is a place where you can submit your writing and it'll tell you your age level, which is very helpful. So if she hasn't found that for you, let me know and I will dig it out for you because you can stick pages in and it will tell you this is reading at a 4th grade level or so forth.
That would be great. I would love that. Thank you.
Okay, I'm making a note because these days, if I don't write it down, it don't happen.
That's the Fleshman Reading Index. Is that the one?
It's based off that. So you put in your writing and it'll tell you this reads at a 4th grade level, 5th grade level, that kind of thing. And that's just helpful in general, because sometimes you're trying to create materials. And I mean, here's the thing that's kind of sort of sad is they say if you're making materials for the general public, you should be looking at stuff around the 8th grade level. Yay, yes. Yay. Yay, education. But otherwise, so that can be helpful if you're doing things like that. But in general, it just gives you an idea. So this is the opening page. And then Bonnie goes into a biography. And Bonnie, where did you put these in GLIP? I'm trying to remember.
I don't know if I've put, when I gave them to you,
yeah,
I put them in
an email thingy.
An email thingy between you and me.
Okay. I might, if you're open, consider posting it in something like Refine Your Craft.
Sure.
And then for you guys, if you want to have a chance that you can read it in more detail, if anyone else wants to weigh in and give some feedback on that.
That'd be lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, because feedback is always helpful because, you're going to get my opinion and you'll get people's opinions just here. But of course, they're not necessarily going to have a bucket of time to respond to that. So what you have is then Bonnie has listed sort of a biography of Gracia Mendez Nasi. Is Nasi correct pronunciation?
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Okay, we're going to go with Nasi because I said it first, so I win. Okay. So if people look through, you'll see that this is a bio, and this bio would be a piece of material that the students would get. So they would be reading this or reading along, or the teacher would be reading it to them. But it goes through Garcia's history. So she's practicing Judaism in secret because it's the Inquisition. So that's a very good time to be practicing Judaism in secret. It talks about the fact that her husband passes away, and it allows her to sort of take over and become the business leader. She amasses a fair bit of wealth. And so she and her family are basically helping other Jewish people who are hiding out, either by paying bribes and so forth. They eventually go to Istanbul, where she can openly be Jewish, and she's basically, I would almost think of it as reestablishing Judaism in a place where she's setting up schools and synagogues and all kinds of things so that she can sort of keep this religion going. And then she dies in 1569. And the point is that basically many Jews owe their lives to saving their ancestors, if not for her. Then there's a lesson guide that would be for the instructor. So it talks about this lesson can be used for both secular and Jewish learning environments. It talks about what can be taught if you're sort of going with a Jewish perspective versus a secular perspective. However you use it, introduce this lesson within this context or goal. Next, explain the unfamiliar terms. And if you're using the worksheet, be sure to review Jewish values before handing it out. Go over the questions. Provides a glossary. And then finally, there is the worksheet that the students would get, which has which Jewish values does Garcia embody and how, which of her actions do you admire, why. One of my favorite quotes, whoever saves a life is considered as if he saved the world. What does that mean? And describe a time you felt you had to keep your identity hidden. What did that feel like? And why do you think she wasn't included in Jewish history for so long? So that is roughly the first one. Now, before I jump in, does anyone else have any thoughts just off the top of their head?
Does the story up front, the first page, is that the whole book? Is that where you're covering in the book?
No, actually, these materials are going to be valuable for people who read the book, but the book doesn't exist yet. This is material that I'm creating to give free resources to people in return for getting their email, because I want to build an email list for when the book does come out. But Gracia is a character in the book, and she plays an important role, but she's not the main character.
You didn't just give, that's not a synopsis of the book, is what you're telling me.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Any other thoughts before I jump in? Because I have thoughts. All right, so now I'm going to pop open my version and we'll go through. And I say this saying that I am by no means an expert in this area. And I know, Bonnie, you've actually worked with a lot of teachers, so I definitely think it's worthwhile sharing the materials with teachers to see if they have any additional suggestions.
Good idea.
So it says this lesson plan can be used for both middle grade and high school students. I would add, even just here, just a line about who Garcia is and what the learning objectives are going to be. Even though the next page is the bio with her in it and tells us all about her, I think, again, when I think of teachers, I think of people who have nearly not enough time to do anything. And so you're almost going to want to spoon feed this even more. So it's going to need to be that kind of thing, like Garcia Mendez is a Jewish hero. She did this, she did that. Here are the things, if you do this lesson plan, that students are going to walk away with. Now, one of the things I know exists in BC, and I suspect exists other places, I know each state has them in the US, is curriculum guidelines for different grades. Mm-hmm. So I would potentially also go through and look at some of those and say, this hits, if you're in Washington State, for example, this hits Washington State's guidelines, blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah for grade 8, blah, 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 blah for grade 9, because they can then just basically be like, oh, I got to cover that, tick, tick, tick. And again, anything that you can spoon feed for people is going to make that easier. As you go into the history, and I will send you this, Bonnie, so you don't have to be madly trying to scramble to write down my thoughts, is again just making things a little bit smoother. So for example, like I don't know if kids are going to know where Antwerp is, so I might even just make it Belgium. I'm not sure that you need all of the dates. I think you need a few, but I think if you have too many, kids start getting lost in that kind of situation. So you're trying to make it as compelling and as interesting as possible. Again, I would feed this through in terms of your question about what's too adult and what's too, through this book. One of the things I certainly know is whenever you can break up sentences, that's usually one piece of advice. Do you never generally want a semicolon when writing for middle grades?
Okay.
But like, for example, one of the words that popped out to me was with courage, diplomacy, and shrewdness and business know-how, Garcia escaped each time. I don't know if they would know shrewdness.
Okay.
That was one that stuck with me. And also you had, and funding an underground to take them to safer lands. I just think most kids today, unfortunately, underground, they're going to think subway.
Okay.
I could be wrong. That's just my hunch. Or I would use a term funding an underground railway, or something that, you know, trying to harken back that they would actually understand that kind of situation. And then the biggest thing is I would then almost break this into steps as a lesson plan. First, you're going to do this, then you're going to do this, then you're going to do that. And making sure that you're making it sound like I'm not telling you what to do, but I am suggesting how this lesson plan can work. So for example, like you have here, if using the worksheet, be sure to review Jewish values before handing it out. Am I going to have any idea what those Jewish values are if I'm a secular teacher?
Right. So this is the issue with this. So I was trying. Yeah, it's complicated. The truth is, this would probably be something that would be more of interest to a teacher at a Jewish day school or a synagogue. That's the truth. But there probably are some homeschool families that would find this useful material. Yeah, and because I'm trying to cover such a wide audience in this way, like I don't want secular teachers to feel like, oh, forget it. I would, that's where the complications come in. And maybe I should just stick to this being for Jewish, but I don't want anyone to feel like they shouldn't use it just because they're not Jewish or teaching in a Jewish school. So that was the dilemma.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest way that you can make this broader is bring in other examples of people who are like Gracia. So, of course, at the moment, can I think of anyone? No, but who helped African Americans during the Civil War escape and start over?
Right, like Harriet Tubman. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. See, like Harriet Tubman would be a great example. Or
well, it's a bit of the underground. It's a bit of the Underground Railway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Same
sort of thing. That's Harriet Tubman. Yeah.
So yeah, I would pull up her. I would pull up if there's someone who kept a political movement alive when it was trying to be beaten out. So, maybe democracy in Poland, or, something where if I'm a secular teacher, we can make this less about the fact that she's Jewish. That's part of the story because of the context that it's in, but it's more about what kind of people stand up for what they believe in. I mean, if you want to make it really popular or at least contemporary, like bring in Colin Kaepernick, and I'll butcher his name, but the NFL player who is currently on the outs because he was kneeling for what he felt was police brutality, and he's been kind of pushed out by the NHL. So making it about comparing her, or how is she similar to other people in a secular or in a different, even just a different religions, you know, if there's someone within the Muslim religion or something like that, will make that less feeling specific to Judaism.
Okay, that's very helpful. And originally there were going to be two different versions of this, a sort of Jewish only version and then a more secular one. And maybe I should think that through a little more.
And that might be the way to go, to feel like you have some more clear delineation around what you're doing. So here's a way that it can be used. And I mean, let's be honest, someone could, I mean, you can list it like this has more of a Jewish focus and slant. This has more of a secular slant. Depending on your classroom or environment, both are available to you. And I can see a lot of teachers wanting to have both and possibly hodgepodging them together depending on what they're doing. But it gives them that option.
Thank you.
Can you go up to the top first paragraph
of the lesson guide or of the biography? Yeah.
Well, of the lesson guide. Well, just where you go through her struggle. No, back up higher. Sorry.
Bye.
I almost want, because the struggle is you know, an oppressive belief or regime pushed down to people that didn't want it, right? Whether it was the Crusades or the Inquisition or the Nazis or the Trumpers or the, you know, something, that's the issue, right? And so the overall thing is this, you know, standing up for what you believe and standing up, you know, against the this. And I don't think so I think a little bit more of what the Inquisition was, sort of a little bit up front would be helpful to kind of put that into perspective.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And that actually brings up, I think, Tony, another interesting slant you could put on this, Bonnie, is making it also around being bullied. Because, of course, that's certainly a very major theme for a lot of middle school and high school kind of students, around someone who is, you know, looking out for others. And again, you can even think around, you know, secret identity. You know, this is obviously probably more high school than middle grade where they'd be tackling it, but, you know, kids who might be not out because they feel not safe to be out. And so they are new straight, for lack of a better term, instead of new Christians. You know, they're pretending to be something that they're not.
Yes.
Even the Hunger Games, right? Like, you know, other books like either the Hunger Games or Harry Potter or, you know, anything that is, you know, that kind of struggle. Anyway.
Great ideas. Great ideas.
When you have the worksheet, when you say which Jewish values does Gracia embody and how, like, I just don't see that being used in a secular classroom.
No, that would never be used in a secular classroom.
But I think you could have just which values does Gracia embody and how, because that is secular, right? Those are things that anyone can be talking about. And the instructor may talk about there are certain things that come from a religious background, there's certain things that are, you know, tied more to one or another or thought about that way. Otherwise, I really like a lot of the questions. Like, I think they would be good questions, getting conversations started. Like, describe a time you had to feel you had to keep one of your identities hidden. Religion, nationality, heavy metal, what did you feel like? Those kinds of things. So I think you're bang on with the questions. It's more about how you're going to frame it within everything else.
Okay, that's really helpful. I appreciate that. I guess I was getting hung up also on making sure the biography was only one page for, you know, so that it was not going to get the kid, you know, just a quick sort of thing. And I think maybe I should put it into two different, like a bigger packet with two different kinds of options in there, maybe.
Yeah, that's what
do you think that it needs? Do you think the biography needs to stay at one page? You know, for the sake of
I think that should be your goal, but I don't think it should be your rule.
Okay.
So that's often when I have time, you know, space limits is thinking like, okay, I know I want to keep this short. So what can I cut that maybe doesn't need to be in there? But if it ends up being a page and a half, I don't think that's a big deal. I think if it ends up being 2 pages, I don't think that's a big deal. But if you can get it to a page and it's tight and lean, then that's always better. Or you might have 2 pages. Like, here's a page about what the Inquisition was like and how it's like
that's
other
what I was
times.
thinking.
And then here's a page about just the high points of Gracia's life.
Okay.
And, you know, what is the most important stuff that people walk away with from there?
Okay.
The second lesson
really
plan. Oh, well, we're not done, Bonnie, so keep your pen handy. The second lesson plan that Bonnie had was, I think one that would, be very interesting and very useful, again, either secular or Jewish, but certainly read more easily to use than the other one did.
Yeah.
So this one starts with, who are you? So this lesson can be used with middle grade or high school participants, has, again, the sort of what's going to be included. And then the lesson guide is, you know, basically talks about, we're going to introduce identity as a theme. And we're going to use yourself or a character as a model to make identities list. And then once they complete that list, there's basically different things that they can do. So, and people will see some of those there. I won't go through all of them, but there's just different activities that could be done with students. And then finally, there is actually the worksheet. So what is the identity definition? Like, your identity is made up of categories that you and others see. Here are some examples. So it's things like younger sister, stepson, child, mother, home, American, Canadian, Oregon, activities, personality, likes, dislikes, culture, religion, ancestry. So all of those are listed in there. It has the students write down all the identities they can think of, including ways that they see themselves and the way others might see them, which I thought was a nice kind of spin on that. And then when they are done, they put a box around any identities that are how others see them, but not how they see themselves. So that's the activity. Now, before I jump in, does anyone else have thoughts?
I think it needs a mission statement at the beginning, just like you said for the other one, so that teachers know what the worksheet is for. They need a nice, quick, this is going to be defining identities or helping children identify what they think of themselves as opposed to how they feel others perceive them.
Yeah. When in doubt, I am a huge fan, even up to the point where it might feel a little foolish, of spoon feeding it for teachers, because that first page may be all that they look at. And so if it doesn't tell them what it's about, then they're going to walk away from it. And you don't want that. Do not want. Okay, now let me open up my thoughts on that. And Bonnie and I, Bonnie with an IE, are on the same page, because I'm like, I definitely would list the learning objectives. So as an example, I put, this lesson can be used to introduce identity as a theme in literature and social studies, or as enrichment to help young people relate to the idea of multiple or conflicting identities. Participants will be able to identify what is meant by identity and how these can be conflicting, understand that their own identity may have multiple facets, understand that others may have a public and private identity, gain empathy, understanding that others may be different than their own, but it is by learning about others' identity that we expand our worldview. So that is the kind of thing I'm thinking needs to be in there. And again, if you know, like if you're targeting for particular schools and they have curriculum things for certain age levels, you can add that.
That's great. Thank you.
Just to kind of give you an idea. And again, you'll see there are places where I'm like, I would give an example. So you have here, like, use yourself or a character that participants are familiar with as a way to model making an identities list. That's just asking the teacher to think that through. So I might be like, let's look at Harry Potter.
Okay.
Harry Potter has these identities. He's half muggle. He's an orphan. He's like, if you can spoon feed that, because otherwise, as I'm a teacher and it's Sunday night and school starts tomorrow and I was, been sick, so I didn't actually come up with a lesson plan, then I think I got to think of it myself.
Yeah, I guess maybe the best way for me to think about this is that the teacher is sick and the sub walks in and this is what they have left them or something.
Yes.
That might be a better way to think about it.
And a lot of times instructors and teachers, to some degree, that's what they're doing. They have, or I mean, I can speak for myself, having taught both writing stuff and taught, I used to teach a lot of classes in counseling and psychology. I always had my lesson plan, and then I had what I always kind of called my oh shit file, which was the, like, I thought the lesson plan would take the 2 full hours, but nobody's asking questions, and like the participation's really low, and I'm looking at the clock, and I'm only 45 minutes into this, and I can't let people go at 45 minutes. So I want to have some amount of material that I can be like, oh, well, this is what we're going to do next. So I need it to be as ready to go as possible.
Got it.
So when in doubt, that's your goal. In terms of the actual worksheet, I'm not certain they're going to understand like the distinguishing character or personality of an individual. I don't know.
Okay. That
was just something that got with me. Just on a practical level, you have your identities made up of the categories, and I think this is really helpful. So you have positions of family, home, activities. And then on the first question, it says, write down all your identities that you can think of. Start with the 10 categories, but there are only 7 categories above.
Well, if you add culture, religion, ancestry, and beliefs, that makes it more.
Okay. Then I might even break those out into different bullet points. Just because my first thought was like, there isn't 10.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
And in fairness, I was looking at this last night, and there might have been a glass of wine. So most middle school kids
That's
are probably not having a glass of wine while they are reviewing the worksheet, and they might not be confused.
Or they might.
Or they might. That's very true. Anyone else have any thoughts they want to throw in? Okay. So
is it feeling age appropriate though? Basically, I mean, are these things that you feel like an upper middle to early high school student would be able to manage?
Oh, I do. Like I would check the reading level, because there may be a few things you break down just to make a little bit more simple. Okay. And again, I'll send you all of these so you have my notes. But I would really be looking at any way that, and that's why I think the identities worksheet is currently stronger than the Garcia worksheet, is because it's very clear about things now. Mm-hmm. And again, like for Garcia, like I think anything you can do to pull to either other characters in books, like how is Garcia like Katniss from the Hunger Games? Right. You know, how is Garcia like, and anything else that you can sort of come up with where kids are like, oh, okay, like that's not old-fashioned and has no relevance to me.
Right. I understand. That's great. That's really helpful. Thank you, everybody, for this.
Of course. All right. So does anyone else have any other questions? Otherwise, I had some stuff to talk about with subplots.
I have a question. So on my second book, I'm going through, and you've read the synopsis, but I've got a new character that I started doing some writing on last night, and I need him to appear as the antagonist, but in fact he's not quite the antagonist. And so I just wrote a scene, and it's okay, but it's not sort of jumping out at me. I guess I'm looking for, what do people do if they've got because I've worked out that I need to have this character. I have an idea what he looks like and what he's doing, but that's about all I've got. I don't know if I can be any more nebulous than that in my requirements, but.
So I actually think it's a really relevant question, because I think it's basically the question when you want the reader to have one perception that later will be flipped on the reader, whatever that is. Yeah. How can you set that up so it doesn't feel like a cheat?
Right.
So the first thing is, this is not a point of view character, correct? Like this isn't someone we're not getting their point of view.
I think I wrote it. I wrote it third person last night.
That will make it much easier.
Yeah.
If you're writing first person or deep third POV from their perspective, it's much harder because in theory we should be in their head. And so we need a reason why they're almost lying to us as the reader.
Right.
If your third or your main character is talking about their interactions with that person, then it's a little bit easier. And I would go with a totally different example from your book, but every single basically romantic comedy that is out there, where you see the character who she says, you know, I have had a crush on Tony for years and I've never had the guts to tell him, but you know what, it's finally going to be time. And I come around the corner and I see Tony hugging another woman and I think, you know, he loves another. And so clearly I was wrong. I totally misread that situation. And of course, later we're going to find out that Tony was just hugging his sister or comforting, you know, someone else. So it becomes that thing where if you play with my expectations, so is there something that the character says and does that could be interpreted two different ways? Because the reader will go with the interpretation that you make most obvious to them.
Right. Okay.
The best part is for them is when they then go back and they realize, oh, what he was really saying was X or Y. Oh, that was his sister the whole time.
Yeah.
Those are the things that will do that.
Okay.
So sometimes
go
ahead, Bonnie.
Is that a brand new character to the entire story? I'm sorry, I haven't read your synopsis. Or is it a character that's already in there and they have to appear at first as the antagonist, but then they're not?
It's I've got about 50,000 words on this story. This is a sequel to the first novel, and as I went through the synopsis and outline, I realized this character, as Eileen said, he needs to appear bad, and then he's good, and then he's actually going to be bad. So I want this sort of couple of reversals.
So he's bad. He appears that. Did he appear in the first novel?
No, it's a new character.
Okay.
And so this is the first writing I did with him yesterday, and I've got him kind of in my I know what he looks like in my head. I know where where he sits in the organization. It's a corporate thing, and but as I started writing, it was a bit it's okay, but I like the idea just sort of I think I wrote I didn't write quite first person, but I don't think it's sort of pure third person, right? So I'll go back and see if I can have sort of the omniscient kind of view of watching him do stuff and listening to him, I think.
Always play with readers' expectations. So the savvy reader is waiting for you to psych them out. So I think the savvy thriller reader is going to be guessing at least the first reversal. Right? Because whenever I read a thriller, I don't trust anybody in there. And I'm always like, I wonder if that person's really going to be doing that. Then you have a group of readers who are just along for the ride. And so they will buy what you tell them, particularly if the main character is like, I don't trust that guy. The reader will be like, I don't trust that guy either, right? Like they will go along with you. So you're sort of playing to those things.
Right. Okay.
So part of it might be taking a scene. So let's say your main character has taken, just because I know a little bit about it, has taken the small girl to a dance competition.
Right.
And this other guy is along as security.
Right.
So we're there and the guy basically insists on, like, he's just being a dick about which way they go and all this kind of stuff. And your main character is like, well, it's one part that he's, trying to keep the kids safe, but I also just think he's being a dick about it and trying to prove that so my impression of this guy is that he's acting like he knows everything and I can't be trusted. So that's going to tick me off. And then, we get to the thing and maybe, he grabs the young girl's arm and she pulls away. And it's, again, it's that kind of thing. Like, is he doing it to be a jackass or did he actually see something that scared him? Because he's, again, if we're going to think he's good at some point, is it that he already anticipates that something bad is planned for this little girl? So, you know, she starts to run ahead and he yanks her by the arm and pulls her back. And your main character, who doesn't know that the little girl's at threat at this point, is like, you know, she's just running into the dance hall, you asshole.
Right.
You know, that kind of thing. Where again, later, if he realizes like, oh, he thought she was a danger, then that makes sense to me that he would do those things.
Okay.
So playing with reader expectations is going to be your goal.
Okay.
And also keeping in mind that nice people sometimes do dicky things. Like if the first time you meet someone is, you know, when they're having a really crap day and so they're behaving in a different way, then all of a sudden that becomes something that your impression of them forever is taken that way.
Yeah. Okay.
People often react according to the soundtrack in their head more so than what actually just happened. You know, they play on their own baggage.
Right.
So you can always twist a scene so that the character maybe responds in an inappropriate way because of wherever they're coming from or what they're.
Right. Okay.
And actually, Mary Ann is correct in that there's actually even a counseling perspective on that. And it's actually, you don't care about the theorist, his name is Ellis, but he did something called rational emotive therapy. And I actually use it a lot in my writing. But I used to use it a lot when I was working with people as a counselor, because his theory basically breaks down to what he calls ABC, which is easy to remember. I've been out of grad school a long time and I still remember it. So A is the activating event. That is what actually happens. B is our belief about that event. C is the resulting consequence. So A, I walk into a room, and when I walk into the room, everyone is laughing. And when I walk in, they stop laughing. That's what's actually happened. I have a choice about my beliefs about that. So the most common belief is they were all talking about me. They were laughing at me. And that's why they stopped when I came into the room. Another belief might be, I just happened to miss the joke. Like the joke just happened to end as I came in.
Right.
Or I could be arrogant as hell and be like, that's right, I'm here, we're down to business, everyone knows we got to get serious, Eileen's in the house, right? Like that's another potential belief I could have about that event. But you can see that consequence is a result of that. So if I believe that you're all making fun of me, it's possible that I'm just like, you guys are horrible, and I run out of the room. Or I just decide that, you know, I'm not going to have anything. I'm not going to come to these meetings anymore. I don't want to be in this writers group anymore. Like they're not nice people. If the belief is this is just that I missed the joke, I just carry on. I don't have any questions about that. If the belief is that's right, I'm in charge again, then I might be like, all right, everyone, now that I have your attention, let's get started with today's writing group meeting. But the consequence can then sometimes shape reality. Because again, maybe you weren't laughing at me, but if that's my belief and I've reacted in a certain way, then that's going to result in how you guys now see me. So again, if I'm like, you guys are horrible, and I run out of the meeting, that changes, like maybe you weren't talking about me, but now you are. So I would be playing with what is the activating event? Like what is it that this character says or does in a scene? Versus what is the belief about how that's interpreted by other characters, potentially.
Right.
Particularly your main character. Because that will then change for the reader what it is. And then later you can go back and you can realize, oh, my belief about that was completely wrong. And that changes everything.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I'm trying for. Right. I want them to, yeah, so that, yeah, and you knew that, so, okay.
The belief is colored by the point of view character. So whoever you're filtering that scene through is the one who can distort reality with their own beliefs the most.
Yeah, no, and I'm just, as I'm listening to everybody, I'm sort of formulating another, I need to introduce them earlier, so I think I've got an idea how to do that, so, Thank you. It's good to just talk through some of the options here.
Yeah. And I think if you introduce him first as a character that we see through your main character's point of view, if later you have a scene with him that's just omniscient third point of view, we're still going to carry some of those beliefs over. That's almost impossible not to do as a reader.
Right.
We make
Right.
first impressions and we imprint on those.
Right.
And then we're looking for that character to either reinforce that or do something in contrast to that. So that, I think, will help
Right.
you
Okay.
out.
Okay.
The tricky part is we always know what that other character actually intended. So sometimes it's hard to get out of our own way.
Yeah.
And so you kind of almost have to put yourself in your other character's head and think, okay, what are the different ways that they could see this
Yeah.
that aren't what I intended?
Yeah.
I don't know. I tend to brainstorm those sort of things, and then sometimes an idea will pop up and I'll go, oh, right, that's
it.
character.
Yeah.
But it's hard because we know what the other character's up to. We know what they're doing.
One of the ideas that I've been filtering through this conversation has to do with something I'm struggling with the story I'm working on, which is there's a romantic element, and it's the aspect of a relationship that's evolving where the hero or heroine is in denial about their attraction to the other person. And so they might be focusing on how irritated they are, or how that person really bothers them, but perceived as in a negative way, because they're shaken out of their complacency, or they're distracted from the person that they thought they were supposed to be attracted to, or something along those lines. And one of the mistakes, I think mistakes that I always make, is being too literal with my point of view character's internal dialogue about where they are in that discovery process. Because I've read stories, I'm even reading one right now, where that denial is a little bit more persistent. But I get really confused, because if they're very convinced about it, then I think I haven't been explicit enough that they are attracted to the other person. Or, like, it's like modulating that discovery process through a whole series of interactions that is very, very hard to manage for me anyway. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a question in there.
I have an answer in there. So I don't know if there was a question or not.
Please enlighten me.
One thing that I can find useful when I'm struggling with that, which is where you have different levels of what the character is dealing with, is sit down with a piece of paper and put 3 columns across the top for the scene. And so in the first column, I would put down, what is it that the character wants? Like, what is their motivation? What's their internal thoughts in this scene? The next column, I would put, what is my understanding of their insight? So for example, their thought, in Marianne's example, is their thought is, my God, I can't stand this. Like, look at how that guy chews. Like, I can't stand how he does that thing. And he's always got the answers, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm going to be like, what do I know as God? Because that's who we are in these stories. Like, what is it that they maybe don't have the insight to realize that I understand? So I understand that they are deliberately trying to find things about that person that they find irritating because they don't want to be attracted to that person. And then the third column is what's actually happening, or what are they saying in the scene? Because those are 3 different things. So for example, if I'm writing a scene where I have a crush on someone, and I'm kind of trying to flirt with them a little bit and, put those feelers out there. So that's what I'm thinking and feeling. And I'm distracted because I find that person attractive and I don't know if he finds me attractive and all that kind of stuff. And then the godlike thing might be that, the thing that I have to learn is to stop trying to please other people. And that, my problem is that I'm always going too far with that. And I don't understand that I don't really like this guy. I just want attention from someone. That's what I'm really trying to get, is approval from someone else, because I don't feel it in myself. And then the third column is, this is a scene about me getting guitar lessons. And so it's supposed to be about me learning to play the guitar, except I have a crush on the guitar instructor. except that I really don't have a crush on the guitar instructor. What I really have is a desire to feel attractive. And so I'm looking for that for different people. So sometimes kind of for myself, I look at what are those 3 different things happening, and then I try and look at how can I show those to the reader on the page? Can the reader get hints of those things? So the internal is the easiest because we can have an internal dialogue. Like, I really have the hots for that guitar instructor. I can't believe how great he is at tickling those strings, right? And then you can, kind of be like, then the challenge for what's happening on the page is making sure that the person isn't too on the nose, because most of us don't say what we actually think and feel. Otherwise it gets weird real quick. So most of us don't do that. So those, I think, are the easiest things to sort of show. And then the third one is then, like, is there any way to hint where the reader starts to suspect there's something much bigger happening?
So I understand that these are 3 different things. And I think that my common mistake, and this might be just part of drafting it and working it out, but part of my mistake is giving the character too much insight into their own character. And so their internal dialogue is too on the nose, is too self-aware. And whereas I think what should happen there are the identity type things where you're telling yourself lies to maintain your belief system, whatever that is. So the question is, if I understand what the character really wants or needs, or what's motivating them, how do I show that in between what they are telling themselves and what they're actually saying and doing? I mean, it's the nonverbal stuff, or that's the hardest part, conveying that to the reader without being obvious. Or
so the easiest way, which doesn't mean you're going to want to do it always that way, but I think one of the easiest ways to do that is by where people have a flash of insight and then run away from it. Because we often, like, before we have real insight, we kind of dance up to it quite a bit. So we have moments where we're like, almost there. No, I'm not. So we're going to, like, there was actually physical generation there. There we go. So they're going to have a moment where they're like, oh, I really, do I really like this guitar? Like, the guitar instructor is 30 years younger than me. Like, honestly, like, do I really like him, or do I just want him to tell me I'm pretty? And then it was like, no, like, of course I find him attractive. Like, so we reject that thought. But then the reader is like, I actually wonder if you're touching on something there.
Yeah, you plant the seed and then you redirect the reader, right?
Yeah. But the reader will, they carry a little bit of that with them. I think that is the most obvious. The second one, which is a little harder for readers to pick up sometimes, but is still there, is when you see people having contradictory thoughts. So what they say and do is different than maybe what they say they want to be doing. Or they're thinking 2 different things where it's like, well, but wait, you can't think both of those things at the same time. Makes me wonder if you're being 100% honest with yourself. So that can be something that can exist in that space. Those, I think, are the 2 biggest ways. But this is one of those things that, I encourage everyone, and, I don't do it enough myself. But if you're reading a great book and you notice a scene in a dialogue, or like, just really deconstruct sometimes, like, how did the writer do that? Like, and I find this is most useful because otherwise it'll drive you crazy. First, read a book just to read it and enjoy it. But if it's a book you really love, like, I absolutely loved Gone Girl. It was one of my favorite thrillers of all time. I've actually, read it a couple times now. But one time I went through it and just really broke down, like, in the opening scenes, what did she do to make me feel empathy for the husband? Because that's where you start in that book, that his wife has disappeared. And then I'm like, where did I start to have the feeling that maybe he wasn't being honest? Because there's these things, like, as he's telling the story, you start thinking like, wait a minute. So I actually went back and kind of like, just, with a pencil ticked off, like, oh, he said this line and it just made the hair on the back of my neck go up a tiny little bit.
Like when he's denying that something happened or justifying something that he did, and you go with it, but it's slightly unsettling.
Yeah, like and of course, can I think of a specific example now? No, I
Well,
cannot.
because he was having the affair and then hiding it and then
Yes.
and hoarding the stuff, and there are all those things that don't come out because he's not really acknowledging them, but there are hints of this
And
stuff.
if you go very back, because when it first starts, you have the impression that this guy's being railroaded. Like his wife has disappeared. The cops are all thinking that he's had something to do with it. He's got nothing to do with it. But yeah, then there's slowly these things start coming up that just are unsettling. And then there's even a thing where he says, I should have told people about the fair. And you're like, what the? And by the time you're getting to that, you're starting to think, I don't know if I believe this guy anymore. But it's done slowly over a period of time. So for me, writing thrillers, that was, and Tony, it may not be your favorite thriller, but there may be another one, looking at kind of what are those moments where all of a sudden, I'm not sure I trust that person anymore. You can do this with movies too. Like go through, like whenever there's a reversal, like is it Unusual Suspects or some of there's some great twists. The heist movie, if anyone saw Ocean's 8 recently with Sandra Bullock, super fun. Like at what point, because you have a moment, like those movies. If you've seen Ocean's, I don't know, 8, 11, 10, whatever they all are, like there's something that you're not being shown. And did you know what it was? Now, again, if you are me, I like when I saw that movie, there's a scene where she's picking out a toy, and you see her, like she's looking over these toys, and she picks out this Junior submersible. And for me, like it's a throwaway scene. They're talking about something else, but for me, I'm like, why are they choosing to have this scene in a toy store? What's going on? And then I actually made the leap about what the heist really was going to be, that it was not what we were being shown on the screen. And when they then later showed the room that had the moat in it, I was like, nah. But
I pick up that stuff too, and then when I'm watching a movie with my husband, and I'm like, oh, I know what's going to happen, and got the whole movie plan in my head, and he's like, what? What did you see? I didn't see anything.
Yeah, this is why no one wants to go to the movies with us, man. Because we're always, and I think that becomes, we're the sausage makers. So we're constantly watching other people make sausage, and we're like, I see what you're doing there. But it's worthwhile to see how those things are buried, and just paying attention and rewatching and being like, what was said? How did they distract me in that scene? What did they do? Because distraction, again, is going to be another great gift for you, Tony, around, I think the scene is about A, but it's actually about B. So I think it's about this discussion that we're having between these two characters, but it's actually about the fact that this discussion is taking place while he's buying a particular thing that later I'm going to realize, oh, that was what that was really about.
The smoking gun.
The smoking gun, right? All right.
That's helpful. Thank you. That gives me some tools to work with.
And then Bonnie put a thing in there, subtext, research different lessons, writing book chapters, blog posts, helps to identify it and then use it. So there are tons of good stuff on subtext, and I'm pretty sure we have something in the Creative Academy too on this.
Thank you.
I say thinking about it and not really remembering. All right, so I'm going to bump our talk on subplots because we have like 4 minutes. So that would be cramming a lot of subplot into 4 minutes, but that's good. That means I don't have to do a lot of planning for the next one. So I'm ahead of the game. But as always, I think this serves as a great reminder. My biggest goal is to make stuff useful and interesting. So if someone has, as Bonnie did, a lesson plan, or they have a question like Tony and Marianne brought up, like that, I think is what this is most useful for. So let's make sure we do it.
I hope my question helped others also today.
Of course. You got a thumbs up from the people, so that's always a good sign. 2 thumbs up. We're growing. All right, everybody. I am going to wish everyone a great week, and I will talk to you all soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Happy writing.
Right back at you.